Hi, Catherine. Hey, Danielle.
Hi.
All right, we'll give it like probably 2 or 3 minutes and then we'll start kind of kicking it off. Just want to make sure everybody can jump in if they're running a few minutes late. I know it takes a minute to get adjusted to Zoom sometimes. Looks like we have a few more people popping in, so just a few more minutes. I see Chris now. I can see your face.
Hey. It's good to have a little social interaction.
Right? So while we're waiting, I'll just kind of describe kind of the format of what we're looking to do today and kind of the goals and purposes. Number one, this is tech resume writing best practices, especially geared to those of you who are career switchers, new to web development, and UX designers. We're really focusing on making sure we highlight some of your projects and showcase you in this new field with your new set of skills. So the goal really is going to be going over basics on resume 101 for those of you who have not started a resume or have an old one that needs to be revamped. We have just some core fundamental resume principles to go over. We're going to be doing this in a PowerPoint fashion, and if everybody can hold their questions till the end, that would be great. That way we want to get through all the material, but we'll open it up at the end to questions, and you can also put them in the chat to have them in the queue. So Danielle and I will be answering those as we see them once we get them. And then at the end as well, we'll have kind of an open dialogue. And I highly encourage you, if you have your current resume, to pull it up. If you have 2 screens possible, great. If not, just kind of go through the checklist or, whatever works best for you, because we want to make sure we get the most use out of this time and really effective for you. We typically run these workshops in person. So this is our very first live webinar for career workshops, and especially having that interaction. We want to continue to have that much engagement, interaction, and value for each of the participants. And at the end of this too, we'll provide you our emails. If you do have continued questions that go over time, please let us know. And yes, Tirza, this is definitely being recorded. So ideally after the meetup, I can send this back out. As well as kind of the slide decks, and I'll give you instructions on how to do that as well at the end. So yeah, we'll begin and kick this off in just a minute here and make sure. Let's see. It's like people have all popped in. Oh, I see it. Hi, Alexi. I haven't seen you for a minute. So this is actually many V-School students as well as open, so feel free, to chat in the group if you have questions, and we're all here to participate and help each other too. So, all right. We'll start and we'll begin, and then if people, come on late, we'll just make sure we mute them and say hi in the chat, hopefully. Make them feel welcome still, of course. All righty. Okay, I'm going to be sharing my screen, and if anybody cannot see my screen, please chat us and let me know. Alrighty, so today we're going over tech resume best practice for web development and UX, as I discussed, and going over kind of those fundamentals. Oops, got them in the Zoom. So it's myself presenting from B School. Many of you know me, many of you may not know me. My name is Lainey Kawaguchi. I am with B School as a Director of Outcomes. I've done management and all sorts of digital marketing, as well as Coder for a year in a managerial hiring manager position for I think like 8+ years now that I added up. I keep thinking I'm like still in my early 20s. I'm like, oh, only like 3. But it's a little bit longer than that. And then we have Danielle Sanslow from the V-School team as well. She is our in-house resume, any type of writing expert, honestly. She comes from an English major, and she has 5+ years of technical writing experience. So she's really honed in on the exacts of writing and what to, make your resumes more concise and clear. So Danielle, you'll see her. She'll be coming in and out of this presentation as well. So Danielle, I don't know if you want to wave so everybody knows who you are.
Hi.
I love it. So let's begin and we'll jump in. The agenda includes obviously introductions, resume 101. So this is for those of you starting out from scratch or new, or if you haven't had time to really pull up your resume, I would recommend just having a Word doc and we can start going through this together. We'll go over what section order should look like, formatting, what to include on your projects, work experience, the do's and the don'ts, how to make your resume pop, stand out, and become more energized, especially in the responsibilities. We really want to focus there. And then education, what to include, resume don'ts, this is a huge one, and a final checklist, and then we'll open it up to questions. So that's kind of where we're at to begin. So number 1, what is the purpose of a resume, right? The whole purpose of a resume is to land you that interview. The goal is to get them to call you back or schedule an appointment to get, to get to know you in the next step further. The resume should tell your story of not only what you did, but also most importantly is like what impact you had. So it should also showcase the skills that you have to offer an employer as well as the potential. So showing kind of what you've done and if you're capable, and also showing your track record of kind of your work history and experience. So like, for example, wow, this guy's an innovator, or wow, he really makes a difference, or she really makes a difference here. She really moves that needle for the company or has really creative ideas. Those types of things can show what potential you have to a potential employer. The information also should draw the interest of the employer without being redundant or over informative. So what that means is, think of these hiring managers and recruiters. They have hundreds typically of resumes going across their desk every day. You want to make sure that you have something that makes you stand out. And I have also included a couple bonus slide with tips and tricks of how to make yourself stand out. So stay tuned for that. We'll go over those as well. But the real purpose we want to just drive home is spend time, invest in your resume, plan, and work on projects and add these things, because this is what people are going to look at to give your first impression, including your portfolio, your LinkedIn, and then your obviously your project work and GitHub. But really this resume is that first impression a brand new hiring manager gets of you. So be sure to spend some time on that. So this one, I'll open this up for a little dialogue. I know we said to wait for the end, but what do you think about this resume? Do you think this is a good or bad resume? And why, of course? Anybody have any ideas?
You can unmute for this.
Yes. Let's see.
I just jumped on, so I'm seeing where we're at. So.
Oh, you're good.
We're wondering how you feel about this resume.
Do you think it's good
okay.
or bad?
Okay, perfect. Let me.
I like it a lot because it looks very nice. It's not a standard Word document, something that I really want to look at.
Great, thanks, Fox. Yeah, this is aesthetically a nice design, right?
Mm-hmm.
For the use of the space, color, and all of that. Anybody else have any feedback?
I think it's a bit, I think it's like a typical resume. I feel like, for example, for the cashier assistant job, oh.
Sorry, that one's flipped on me. Let me go back.
I'm sorry. It described what he or she like was doing, but I don't think it really fully went into the details of the impact it had, the person had at the company. And I think the employer, it's not going to make them stand out compared to other applicants.
Perfect, right? Precisely. This doesn't have anything that shouts, wow, right? So thank you so much for that feedback. You've actually taken it to the next level. There's a few things that we totally agree on. One, it doesn't show what impact they had, right? And it is pretty generic. And there's nothing really special about this, you know, as far as a job or anything that makes me remember like, wow, this person's qualified. The other things that are don'ts, and we'll go through this, is the profile picture, right? You can't see their face. And we also recommend do not include your picture on a resume. The goal of the resume is for you guys to be qualified and considered for your skills and not to have any potential bias. So we always err on the side of no pictures. Also, the contact me information is kind of low, hard to find. It doesn't have a lot of information, and I don't think this is the best way or a good example to showcase a person, right? This is nothing catchy, as Reno's saying. So totally agree there. We'll move on to another. I want to show you a few other examples and get your feedback. The goal is to really have you think in the eyes of a hiring manager. So when you go ahead and implement this into your resumes of thinking strategically, okay, as a hiring manager, would this stand out or is this impacting? So we'll go to the next one. Alrighty, open this back up. What do you guys think about this resume?
I just want to say first off, when I look at it, I understand like what kind of job they're applying for or like what industry, which I think is a really good, like a good positive thing, you know, because it's like if I'm going to come for like a web developer, I want whoever's looking at this to know it's like, oh yeah, he's a web developer. So
Bingo.
I would agree with that also, but it's not very aesthetically pleasing. It just looks like a 5-second Word document where you just wrote things down.
Okay.
Good feedback on that too. Yeah. Thanks for
I
that.
always struggle with this actually. Like both of those resumes, like I always struggle with because this is very informative, right? So I'm like, oh, like especially I feel like as a woman in the industry, I want to come across very sophisticated and like I know what I'm talking about. So I feel like if I use colors, they're gonna think like, I don't know, maybe they're gonna lowball me with the salary or, oh, she likes pink or something, you know? So I always struggle with, okay, how do I say that, oh, I've made this much profit for a company and like be a bad A basically,
Go ahead.
but also not be boring at the same time or come off as like not creative because if we're going into UX and UI design, you know, I don't.
So
A really bad example of my creative skills.
yeah, so for UX UI design, I think you guys made a wonderful point. Aesthetically, so this is speaking more to design, front-end web developers, people are gauging that level of can they design? Are they looking at kerning and letter spacing? Are they considering if things are balanced in the resume? So I think overall you guys got it on the nail. Like this is a great informational resume. It has all the information. It gives me a great first impression of, hey, is this a web developer or is this a UX designer? And that's one other thing we'll go over is when you first look at a resume, what is your first impression? What jobs are they qualified or are they applying to? So this is really interesting to do. I usually send this, and this is part of the review we'll do at the end of our checklist. You have a parent, a friend, a coworker. I just have even somebody totally non-technical. What job does this look like I'm gonna apply to? Because that's the first impression. So that's a really good point that you guys made. And for designers, yes, you guys will want to showcase your skills in Sketch and showcase your skills, you know, designing, what color palettes, spacing, is this something that has visual hierarchy? So those are things that I think you made a good point. The design, not maybe great for front-end design developer, great for information. And we'll cover this part in just a minute here. And last quick one, we'll just get 2 seconds of feedback. What do you guys think of this resume? Good, bad, better?
I think of all of them so far, I prefer this one. It's a little bit dense, but I think aesthetically it's nice to look at. My eye kind of reads it very easily. No, it's a good synthesis of the 2 previous ones.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I think it's really good how the color schemes are used.
Definitely.
Oh, sorry. I have a magic mouse, you guys, by the way, and I apologize. It is so touchy. Sometimes I touch it's like next screen. I'm like, that's not what I wanted. So that being said, we'll move forward, and this is kind of the basics of the do's and don'ts. And Sarah, I really like kind of how you said like it's visually a little bit more enticing on that last resume, because I agree, having that little bit of color and a little bit of design work made a little bit, or a big difference, I'd say, in kind of showcasing. So I'll turn it over to Danielle, and she'll go further and explain why there's like this boring type of resume that gives all the information, and then that you should also have this design version for kind of humans to review and look at. So Danielle, I'll let you review this one.
All right, thanks, Lainey. So yeah, those are good comments, guys. I totally agree. And sometimes it is fun to play around with your resumes a little bit more, and with the design version, it is more fun to experiment and bring your personality out. And so that second resume we looked at is a good example of more of a flat, unformatted version. And that's more of an ideal resume that you would submit to an applicant tracking system. And so if you don't know what an applicant tracking system is, it's a database that a lot of bigger companies use, and you submit your resume to it, and they have search criteria where they take keywords and years of experience, and they filter through your resumes, and then that's how your resume gets sent to the hiring recruiters. And so that's an ideal time to just really take out any columns. There's no italics, there's no colors. You just want as basic of a resume as possible. And that's an okay time to have a longer resume. That's when you can kind of throw out some of the rules, and you could have a 3-page resume because you kind of want to stuff it with as much information as possible to get pulled through. And so that's okay to have. Ideally, you want to have 2 versions of a resume. And then you want to have a more designed version, kind of what we saw with the third resume. And that would be one that you would send directly to a hiring recruiter, ideally through an email. And so we call that a designed or human version. And so that's where you can bring in the columns, you can use italics, you can bring in some color. I think Serena, I'm sorry, I can't remember who was talking about that. Well, you were talking about worrying about bringing some color into your resume. That would be okay in a design version, to bring some color into your resume. And so that's kind of something to think about. You want to have 2 versions of your resume. And it's, even in a design version, I would still try to keep it to 1 page, but you can go to 2 pages if you have relevant information. Make sure you're not just stuffing it with irrelevant stuff, because if it's going to a human version, their attention span isn't going to be very long. Sometimes you only get 10 seconds. And so you really want to make sure it's pleasing to the eye. And 1 page, I highly recommend 1 page, but Lainey has talked to some recruiters and they have said, no, 2 pages is fine. So it really just depends. My personal preference, and Lainey kind of leans toward this, we say 1 page, but it just depends. If you have really good relevant information that you need to put on there, 2 pages can be okay.
And there was a great question. Sorry to stop you, Danielle.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Somebody asked, how do I know what's an application tracking system or not?
Oh,
so I will
great.
let you guys know, if you upload into a big system, like Home Depot has their own application tracking system they use, where you enter their form fill and upload your resume. Every company is a little different. There are multiple platforms out there, and they have multiple different settings. So there's no hard and fast rule, but generally if you upload and apply online, you'll start to see which ones are actually applicant tracking, and they kind of scrape your data and pull it in there. The goals and the best practice I have is, after you've submitted something online and you're not sure, to be sure to find somebody human to send that resume to. I will give the example, OC Tanner uses an applicant tracking system, but they've set it up where the application as a PDF goes straight to the hiring manager, but then other people have a system where the applicant tracking system scans your whole resume, and basically it just reads for all those keywords in Word, and if you have any formatting, like in italics, it will eliminate it. That's why we say flat, no formatting, and this is the one that can be 2 to 3 pages. It's hard to give you that rule, like I said, because ConsultNet uses a different one where they're the ones, if they have italics, they're like, we don't even see that column. Whereas OC Tanner, you can send any format, and they've set it up so it goes to a human. So you can kind of use your best judgment. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to us. But go ahead, Danielle.
Yeah, I did just see another little comment talking about government jobs. That definitely is a different situation. So that's a really good point. A lot of times they do require like a 3 to 4 page resume. So a lot of times it is based on each job. So sometimes these aren't hard and fast rules, they're basic guidelines. So that's a really good point. And so on every resume, you're going to want to provide your basic info, name, phone number, email at the top. Include your portfolio URL and your GitHub, and make sure you're putting a hyperlink to these sites. Oftentimes when I'm editing the resumes, there's not a hyperlink, and so I have to individually go in and type these into the search bar. And it's probably just my human error, but I usually can't actually find the site. And at that point, you've lost the employer's attention, and you're probably not going to get through to the next stage of the hiring process. And if you're hyperlinking, make sure it's to the correct site and it's not going to a 404. Also add in a LinkedIn hyperlink so the employer can find out more about you. And just make sure it's a vanity URL, so it's your name and there's not letters or numbers at the end of that. And if you guys have questions on how to do that, we can show you how to do that as well. And provide a hard skills section at the top of your resume and highlight your projects at the top of your resume. You're going to want to highlight all of the most important information at the top of your resume, make it top heavy. Like I said, you're only holding their attention for so long, especially if it's in front of a human. And so you want to put all the most important information at the top so you can catch their attention, hold their interest, and so they'll keep reading on and keep wanting to find out more about you. And then if Lainey, you want to go to the next slide. Okay, and so how to order your section. So this is actually the template, it looks like, that we saw earlier. And this is a really good flat resume template, but I would even recommend taking out the lines in between the sections because that could potentially get in the way of an applicant tracking system. So that's something to think about. And there's no columns, it's just one column, which is really good. So that could be something to think about. If you want to make a flat version, you could use that template. And so your basic contact info is at the top, as you can see, and then they have their skills section, and then they listed their projects, and then you list your work experience and your education. Would bullet points need to be removed from the flat version? I think you can use bullet points. I think that's just fine, right, Lainey? Yes, okay. Work experience and education. So that depends on how you list that. So if you have work experience that has nothing to do with, say you're applying for a UX position, you have work experience, which is great. You can highlight soft skills. So say you've been a barista and you've recently completed a course in UX design at D School, you would list your education above your work experience to show off your most relevant information closer to the top. You would still list your work experience, you would just do it below education. Say you have practical experience in the field of UX design, you would list work experience above education. So it just depends on what's most relevant to you. So just go off your personal experience. And so that's why it's kind of in the same section. It just depends on your personal experience. And then next would be awards and languages. And then there's that little note there that order most important from top to bottom, left to right for visual hierarchy. Just think about how you read a page. You don't want it disjointed and scattered. And even in a design element, think about that. You want to be creative, but you also want it to be readable. Sorry, is there more? Oh yeah, that's a good comment, Lainey. Okay, and next, thank you. Okay, so use 10 to 12 point font. This does seem pretty obvious, but I have had a lot of resumes with smaller than that. And if it's any smaller than that, I promise you it's too small to read. And for the most part, they will be reading it on a computer, and it really is just too small. And I wouldn't go more than 12 because it's too big. It takes up too much room on the page. Your section headers can be larger than 12 because you want to create section breaking. Use basic and readable fonts like the ones listed there. There are more options than just those. Those are some of my favorites. You can pair some together. My favorite pairing is Arial with Georgia, but you can do whatever you want. I personally love playing around with fonts just to get some fun design elements out of it. If you do use a template, I would say to change the font. Do little things to make it your own, because a lot of people are using those templates, and so hiring managers are most likely seeing those templates over and over again, especially for the same positions. A lot of the skills are going to be the same. You want to make yourself stand out, and the simplest thing to change it would just be to change the font. That seems silly, but it really can change a resume, and I see them all the time. I promise you it can change a resume. Also, when you are saving your resume, use the proper naming convention. Lainey and I lose resumes all the time because you guys aren't putting your names on them correctly. And that will happen with the hiring manager. Say they want to go back and see your resume or send the resume on to somebody else. It's going to get lost in their files because you haven't put your name on it correctly. That is the smallest thing, but that could lose you a job. The craziest thing.
Oh, Chris, he said he's been doing it. And yes, every hiring manager I've talked to, recruiters like, please name your file because I don't know. And I download it, resume 2020, which that is. So
That's awesome. Thank you for that comment, Chris. Yes, thank you. Okay, proof. Also, make sure to save it in a docx or a .pdf. Do not use the Apple software Pages, I think it is. I've never had an Apple, so I'm a little bit of a novice on that. It's a horrible system. It doesn't, sorry, I am not trying to offend anybody. It's a horrible system to transfer to another system. It just doesn't transfer to any other. And most large companies are not using Apple software. So just be really careful. I know it doesn't go through applicant tracking systems for sure. So just be really careful when you do that. And also in Word, I think Lainey put this in the chat, but just be careful because we don't do this very often, but sometimes we do make edits inside a Word doc. And I think for some reason, it's really hard for some people to know that there's edits in there. And if you send that on to an employer, they can see the edits and the markups in there, which would obviously make you look really bad. It would make it seem like you don't know what you're doing and you're applying for a tech position, so it would look extra bad. Most likely you wouldn't get that job. So have somebody look over it, make sure that there's nothing funky going on. This has actually happened with one of our students a couple times where they keep sending me a resume to edit and I said, can you clear out the comments on there so I can have a fresh resume? And they're like, what are you talking about? Like, it is a fresh resume. And I said, no, it's marked up. And they haven't been able to see it. So just be careful about that. So yeah. Okay. As for projects, this is great for people who are career switchers, new developers, and for UX designers especially. If you have practical experience in the field, this really isn't that necessary for you because you'd want to put your practical work experience. But for a lot of students who are attending B-School right now and who haven't had any practical experience, projects are a great way to highlight that you know what you're doing and you have the skills and that they should hire you. And so what you'll want to include is the project title, a link to the project, a link to your GitHub repo for web dev students, a description of the project, explain what the user can do, how it works, what technology you use. So I often see, built with, colon, and then the technology. And really dig in here, really explain what the project does, what you put into it, why you did it. I mean, this is really take up some space there. That's okay. It's at the top of the resume. You really want to show them what you did for this. And if you're putting it on there, make sure you're proud of this and that you can speak confidently to the project, because if you just kind of threw something together, it really shouldn't be on your resume because they'll go look at it and it won't be impressive. It won't look like you know what you're doing. And they'll think, oh, this is just kind of a student and they won't be able to keep up here. So.
Yeah, and to add with that, I was going to add with that description, I think we talked about this for applicant tracking systems. The more description you can give your description, keep it to like 3 or 4 bullet points, but talk me through, don't just tell me, hey, Lainey, I have this web application that's for this beauty salon or this tattoo shop, and I used React and Mongo to build it. We want to know, okay, well, what did you do how did you build it? Did you build the front end? Did you design this? Talk me through some of the problems. Did you use an API request to go do something and get something from a database? Did you structure and create the architecture in your database? Give us a little bit more. One, it also gives a really good background to your project and is really impressive that way that you can, one, speak to what you've done and it showcases what you've done. But number 2, also for applicant trackings, that gives you another opportunity to use additional keywords, which helps with keyword density, it's called. And so keyword frequency or density, it helps the more you can speak to something. Keep it relevant, but tell us about your project. Being vague is not going to help here. We want to know exactly what you did and how you did it. So that's really, really useful there. So I can't emphasize that enough. And the other thing, like Danielle had mentioned, please take some pride in all your projects that you put on there. If you have any doubt or hesitation, it will show, when you're interviewing, you're talking about it. So this goes beyond just the resume. If you have a project and portfolio, make sure you're 100% confident. No links are broken. everything's up and running well. If it's a UX project, make sure the screens look beautiful. You explain kind of what you're going through. If you have an Envision app, the right buttons are working. Make sure it's your best work, because this is your best and first impression that those people get, you know. And if a link's broken to even visit your site, that's a big no-no, because then like they can't even see if you work on that stuff. So just want to emphasize speaking to your projects, especially for you new developers and UX designers, to give that first wow impression, like, wow, this person really knows how to develop. Versus if I had put my personal experience before was digital marketing, they'd be like, this person's in the wrong field. Like they need to be applying for digital marketing. No, I'm going to put my projects first and talk about my projects. Say, wow, this person's a developer. And designers as well, showcase your projects there, so they can be wowed by kind of your UX designs and really cool sketch art. So next item, moving on to work experience. So work experience, so you want to make sure you include, right, the company you worked for. These are basic information things, job title, dates you worked there, and please include the month and the year. We've seen people just including the year. Adding that little extra detail is really important, so you can see the extended period of how many months they were there. The location of the job is also very important to have. Like I said, these are just the 101s if you're new to making a resume. The don't list jobs that ended more than 10 years ago. And if you're keeping it to that designed one page, it'll be about 2 or 3 relevant recent jobs. You can do chronological order, which is obviously going from my current backwards in time. And then also, if it's applicable, let's say you're a UX designer with graphic design or any other types of background that are applicable, but it was 2 or 3 jobs ago, it is okay to list those. And this is what's called a functional resume. So a functional resume will include jobs with relevant work experience. So if you have a little bit more space to work with on your flat version, you can go into depth on adding maybe more than like 5 jobs to get there chronologically. But if we're working in that designed one, we can go into the functional piece and say, okay, I need to put my functional on. This is going to human. I want them to see the most relevant. And if they have questions, they can come to you later with that time gap. And you can explain, I created a functional resume to showcase my most relevant skills. And you can explain the gaps, of course, if you work, school, whatever you need to. I've had people stay-at-home mom and starting a new career. So those are different things as well. You want to make sure that you're only using 3 to 4 bullet points, no more than 3 to 4. You have to remember hundreds of thousands of these kind of are going across this recruiter and hiring manager's desk. They only have a few seconds. It's up to about 6, they say on average, to give that first impression scan, to make it easy to read by using those bullet points and then making sure you're not overwhelming them with like a giant paragraph. You want it to be easy to digest. And then also what's most important about these responsibilities and when you work on projects, like show us what metrics and impact you have. So use metrics and show what accomplishments you've done that are time bound, use things that are measurable, specific, and relevant, and use numbers and percentages wherever you can. And we'll go into depth on this. This is something that will make your resume really pop and stand out. And oh yes, and Tears added a great point on here. The most relevant things to that job, and this is something we'll go through at the end, and it's when we go through the next steps of now we have our resume, our main draft, what's next. But yeah, Tears, you're correct. We'll definitely go through adding relevant points first, very important. And then also mention in there, let's say you don't have web development background, that's okay in your work experience. We just want to see, like, have you had a job? Have you worked in teams? Can you collaborate? Are you somebody that is, maybe you're really good at training people and working with different people, you know? So those are really big soft skill like wins that I would say. An example that I've included right here, and we'll go through a couple of these because I feel like the more examples you see, the easier it gets to write your own. So instead, I'm going to put metrics first. So I increased company sales by 8% in 1 year by leading, collaborating, training, and mentor a team of 5 sales members. So an example I also give, and we can move to the next one slide, is when I say this, for example, what the big difference is if I tell somebody, what do you do on the day-to-day? And this is me before I put in results or anything. And I was just explaining, like, okay, I do check-ins with our students. I do emails. I oversee the curriculum and curriculum updates. And I Slack a bunch of people, right? Not so exciting. But the results of that are way exciting, right? I get, you know, out of all of our students we work with, like I'm working with 40 actively now, I'm helping them get job placements, right? So 80% job placement for 40 students. And then I do this by email, Slack, open communication, training, and also curriculum, right? So that's way more exciting than just like, oh, I do emails and basically I'm on Slack and email and Zoom all day. Realistically, that's my job, is consists of that, right? But the impact of what all those things I'm doing is what matters. And so this is what recruiters and hiring managers want to see. Are you making a difference where you're at? So a really easy formula is, okay, I accomplished X as measured by Y by doing Z. So it's saying, taking an example of, I studied financial performance of companies and made investment recommendations. Does that sound very exciting? Like, not so much, not really like that impacting. It's like, okay, cool. Now let's see if we put in some results. I improved portfolio performance by 12%, that's 1.2 million over 1 year by refining cost of capital calculations for information poor markets and reweighing portfolio based on resulting valuations. This is way more exciting. Just when I read that, I'm like, wow, versus the first kind of definition. And that's what's gonna make you stand out from everybody else writing regular resumes of, this is what I do day to day. Well, okay, well, how did you impact that company? And that immediate switch, it's really surprising. If you put that impact you had right before, it just makes that excitement and energy, I feel like, when you read it, and it's a lot more active read and excitement for a recruiter. So that's just a little kind of tip. I'd say, I'll send this out, but this is the main thing to screenshot when you're writing just good responsibilities for a job. So the next one, I'll turn it over to Danielle. It's just going over education.
Yes, sorry, I'm just responding to the chat. Okay. Okay, so education section, best practices. So first, you'll want to include the name of the school, and this could be a tech school like B school or a university, and then your degree or your certificate. So like if you did the full stack JavaScript, like at the example at the bottom, or like for me, I did an English degree. Your major or minor. If you got a minor, you don't, that might not. I didn't do one. So, yeah. The month and the year that you graduated or completed the course. I just do the month and the year. Sometimes people do the dates they completed the full, when they started and when they finished. I just do the time I ended. That's up to you. I personally just think that when you ended is fine. If you completed the course longer than 10 years ago, omit the date, just for discrimination reasons. Sometimes they discriminate if you're a little bit older, so just omit the date. Put the location of the school. You can just do Salt Lake City. I don't think you need to do the country or the state or anything. You can, just think about room. If you have the room, I think it's okay. But if you're squished on room, in our example right there, she did Providence, Rhode Island, she had the room for it. But if you're getting squished on room, think about ways to cut down on space. So say I didn't have a lot of room there, I probably would have just done SLC instead of spelling out Salt Lake City. You can also list industry-related classes that you took. So if you didn't complete the degree, but you took certain coding classes, you could list those just to show extra skills that you have. And then for applicant tracking systems, it would also be helpful to provide a detailed description of the school and what is taught to add keyword density and matching. So in that little box down there, it is an example of someone who really went into detail of everything they learned in their program. And I actually do that on my resume as well. And I just list out a lot of the classes that I took just to add in extra keywords and to show more skills that you have, because education is really important and it's valuable and it shows that you completed something and it's a valuable thing to add. And really, you don't have room for that a lot on your human version. And so on your applicant tracking system flat version, that's a more valuable place to do that because it can be longer. So.
And like Danielle said, if you have courses completed, let's say I went through partial, CS degrees at a school, just make sure you include and be honest with that of, hey, I have completed courses. Don't state you have a degree. The last thing you want is to make it come across misleading or like you were trying to play that up when it wasn't a full degree. That's like a big thing that a lot of actual hiring managers have said, if you don't have the degree, you usually don't list it. But if there's some relevant courses, list those, but make sure you are clear that these are courses completed, not a degree completed.
Yes.
So that's just something that not just myself I come across, but like many hiring managers say, like, that's the last thing is we want you to have trust and, make sure you're being honest about that. But if they're relevant, I mean, of course, list those. Just be clear that they're courses.
Okay, so the don'ts for your resumes, these are not laws. I mean, they're not hard and fast rules. They're just, we highly suggest you do not do these things. So we talked about this a little bit at the beginning. Do not include photos, mostly because it could lead to discrimination, whether for age or race. It's just, and also I personally believe it makes it more personal and less professional. And just in this example to the right, it's a strange photo to include already. In the example earlier, it was just like the back of their head, more of an artistic photo than a professional photo, which could, and I see this on LinkedIn's a lot as well. And so that's a problem in and of itself. And so I would just highly recommend don't include photos on your resume. Also, don't include personal information and interests. He has that listed on the bottom of his resume and interest section. It's just not the place or time for it. If they are interested in you, put a link to your LinkedIn. They can go find out more about you. That's an excellent place to put more personal information about you. It's your resume, that's just taking a valuable space where you could list things about your professional skills. Also, don't include references upon request. That comes at a later stage in the hiring process. Definitely have that information set aside in a separate document. That's great to have on hand. I would definitely have that information set aside, so if they ask for it, you can immediately just send it over. But don't put that on there. It's just a waste of space. And it's a little bit old-fashioned. I remember having that on there, my first resume, like 10 plus years ago, so no need for that. Also, in your education section, don't list your GPA under your education. It's not necessary. That would come if you were applying for a master's degree or a PhD. Yeah, that's what it's called, a PhD. Or sometimes government jobs, I think, but really it's not necessary in just a standard resume. Also, don't use industry-specific jargon. I see this a lot in jobs that people have worked before. They use acronyms that are, and it doesn't, you might think it makes you sound more like smart, or they might be more impressed with you. It honestly just leads to them not really understanding, and it creates a distance. They'll just feel separate from you, and it doesn't create a connection. It doesn't create interest. You want to use familiar language that is understandable, that they can connect with, that they feel like, oh, this person has some skills. I feel like they would be a valuable asset to our team. Not, oh, I don't really know what they did here. I don't see how they could fit in here. Also, don't use cliches like team player or hard worker. If they are in the job description and you're trying to keyword match, that's an instance that it's okay, because that's actually smart. But other than that, I mean, anybody can kind of throw those in there. You want to make yourself stand out, and you want to be unique. And those are things that a lot of people say, and they're kind of generic. And then we have talked about this. Don't go over 2 pages unless requested. The applicant tracking system we kind of talked about. That's a different case. So.
And to add in for like general fluffy statements, I mean, think about if you are a team player and this is a huge strength, great, but the goal is to substantiate those claims, right? So give an example at work when you were a team player, or showcase how you've been a team player. I led, trained, and organize or collaborate with a team of 6, and I enjoy working with others in a team player environment. Like, showcase and really add that substantial kind of background and claim, you know? So you need to add evidence and proof that, cool, like I'm saying, like everybody's gonna be like, I'm like the hardest worker ever, great, but prove it, you know? So that's where we say, you know, you can add those things, but make sure you substantiate them and add in information supporting that. So everybody's gonna say that when they're first getting a job, right? You know, like they're a hard worker and all these things, but tell me why. Why are you that hard worker? Why should I hire you on my team? How do you work with people? So as a hiring manager, those are questions I think about when I look at this resume. Does this person have, 1, the skills I need? 2, are they going to get along with my team, right? So that's kind of when you start going down the rabbit hole of in the rounds of interviews. So we'll start touching on those items. And I think we might do a 2nd series or 3rd series for these tech resume, and then following up and going through the whole process. So in addition to that, oops, let me go forward. So your final checklist, if you haven't had your resume pulled up right now, and we'll actually include, so if you guys want to email me for the PowerPoint and other resources, I'll include a resume checklist, this PowerPoint, and a link to that recording. So shoot me an email. It's in this in the chat, and I'll post it again, and I'll show another slide. But basically, from this PowerPoint alone, the final checklist is review your own resume with the checklist and best practices we covered. Like I said, we have condensed this to a one-sheeter, so you don't have to go slide by slide. And it's nice because you can go down quickly. Update your resume if there's updates that need to be made. For example, my responsibilities aren't that punchy and they don't really show my impact. So I'm going to revisit and then rework that and update them. And the last thing is a final format review before you send this out. Make sure you click on all your links if you PDF it, and make sure everything works. Make sure that the URLs are going to the right projects. You have GitHub link repo, links that are going to the right project, and making sure kind of everything's working. I've had students who were like, Lainey, I applied 100 jobs. I didn't hear anything back. Their links were all broken, right? Or 2 of their main links were broken. Simple things like that can be avoidable. And then the other thing is ask for a peer to review to check for grammar. There's nothing quicker to omit a resume like total bad spelling and grammar errors all over, and also sloppiness overall. That person isn't meticulous, especially in this field for web development and coding. Detail-oriented matters, right? If you're missing that semicolon, it'll kill you, and it's awful. and then if like in UX, it's simple as the spacing. So detail matters, right? And so the last step is start applying. And this is the really exciting point, when you can really get your resume out there and see how it's going. So for everybody who has been in this presentation, I did add a little bonus slide of pro tips from hiring managers, recruiters. I also attend lots of meetups and trainings myself, and then I do hiring on our teams. And one thing that I've learned from all this is when you apply, and I recommend this for anybody, people haven't been doing this necessarily that I've worked with, so I tell them, tailor each of your resumes with words and phrases from the job description. The answers to what they are looking for is in the job description. And the other thing is be sure to have all your projects live, a finished portfolio that looks nice and complete. Make sure all the function works and things are easily, readable, and make sure you have your LinkedIn updated. This is a good source to have also recruiters come talk to you, or people look at you and say, okay, well, let's look at their profile. Every company I have worked at has the whole team. If we're interested in that person, we'll jump on and be like, let me learn about this guy, this gal. Are they going to fit with us? What's their background? Let me see their projects. So it's really important to have your LinkedIn built up. Like I said, I think we'll have another additional part to this of LinkedIn and kind of continue meetups where we help you with kind of creating this full, well-rounded profile to present when you go out there. But that's just something to keep in mind. After you apply, this is really important. Reach out on LinkedIn or a hiring manager at SoFi and even our school. And I think who's the other one that mentioned they barely have anybody do this, which is surprising. So if you do that, your name pops up, and when your resume comes up, they're like, oh, I'll definitely take a look at this, right? I remember that name. And the more frequent your name is, whether that's in if you're in Utah JS and they see you active in a community and just kind of networking out there, or like your name is going to stand out the more they see that. So just a little friendly, hey, I'd like to introduce myself. I applied for this job, and that's very simple and sweet, all you have to send. And then the last thing is also finding a human to send your resume to. Because the applicant tracking, they all are so different and they're not consistent. It's very difficult to say my application went through seamlessly on this one, right? Because like I said, at ConsultNet, if you have italics, it wipes out any italics or anything, like the whole line, I mean. And then if you're at OC Tanner or even like CHG, they actually get your resumes usually. I can't remember what CHG is on their recruiting platform. There's like, it's called ADT, typically what a lot of big companies use, but they can configure that to say scrape for keywords. But if you can find that hiring manager, do some research on LinkedIn. I even go to the general or give a call and say, I have some questions about this job that was posted. Who's the best person to contact? A little bit like more guerrilla warfare that way. but it's quick, so you have a real human to get your email to, and you can make that impression on them. You can't really make that real good first impression with everything else you offer to like a machine for applicant tracking. So I say reach out to a human if you can. And then advice from literally every hiring manager, our staffing partners I work with, they say these are advice that across the board, every single one has said. Build, build, build. Build stuff, create wireframes if you're in UX, build prototypes. This shows them, are you passionate? How many projects are you pumping out? You know, are you working on stuff? That will go a long way, because somebody's working on things over somebody who's not at night. I'd probably take that person who's passionate, because they're going to learn at a faster rate. And also they're really invested. The second thing is GitHub green tiles on portfolio for progression. So having green tiles, I know this isn't exactly indicative to like, I'm like a pro programmer, but you have to recognize that a lot of hiring managers, the first round that go through aren't necessarily the technical people, right? So typically how hiring works is you'll get that first, my resume will go through the scanner, and then, okay, once it gets qualified and I get my top applicants, that hiring manager will review them, and that recruiter really will look at, okay, let's look at LinkedIn. Are there projects? Do they look good? And also at GitHub, because this is the only visibility they really have to see and to really dictate, are you passionate? So somebody with a ton of green tiles with maybe somebody with like less, obviously, is somebody that looks like they're more active, right? So you guys have to create that presence, and I really encourage you as web developers to push to GitHub. And if you're in UX, keep putting new projects on your portfolio and showcasing them. Post about them in LinkedIn, create your social kind of persona and visibility. If they don't see it there, they're not gonna be able to see it because they don't get to interface with you day to day, right? And the last thing is network or make connections, as I say. Go out and meet people, hit them up on LinkedIn, on Utah.js, because you just never know who works where and who they know. And just having one person refer you helps you get through the applicant tracking, and at least will get you considered to come in usually, like, or at least a call, or at least they'll read it, versus kicking in the no pile if you don't have all the qualifications. So the goal really is to get your foot in the door that way as well. And this is the other one. Like I said, if you guys want the PowerPoint, please send me an email. Just shoot it to my Lainey@vschool.io with your email, and I'll put together, I think I'll also include our resume checklist, like I said, so you can do this at your house, this PowerPoint, the recording, and then if you have any additional questions, I think there's something here. You guys mentioned the cover letter. Cover letters aren't as popular as they used to be. However, they don't hurt. Many of our alumni who've gotten hired quickly, they felt like the only reason they got pulled in for that first interview was with that cover letter. They can't hurt. They can only add 2 keywords and richness for the applicant tracking when you upload the document. So I would say I create a general one and you customize it with some very short tips and tricks. Where you have about yourself is generally the same, your history, why you got into coding, what makes you passionate about it. And then your skills are generally, your skill sets aren't going to change, but you'll have sections where you want a little snippet about a company to personalize that. So yeah, I would say those are where cover letters cannot hurt, they can only help. And having a general template like a resume and a cover letter one, and then you customize and tailor those with keyword phrases and anything about the company, can't hurt at all. So please feel free to email myself and then Danielle if you have any other questions. But if you want a copy of all our material that we're going to be sending out today, please send me an email and jot that down. Let's see here. And lastly, I just want to let everybody know out there right now, obviously with the quarantine, I hope everybody's been, doing okay. It's getting a little stir crazy at this time. I start to talk to my cat a lot more like a human. I already did, but right now we do offer scholarships, and we're kind of promoting scholarships and continuing education. It's a really good time to sharpen the saw, especially because obviously the globe, we're trapped inside, and a lot of places, are kind of slowed down. So right now, if you have friends or family members, please have them look into this if they're interested. I mean, I think now is the best time to learn and even program. Like at night, I'm even continuing to do some learning and continue learning. So yeah, please apply and let us know. And we can, if you have any additional questions, I've included Debbie on there. And there's also the veteran scholarship. So I'll open it up now to any questions you guys have overall, or anything like that. And scholarships for, let's see. On the You Belong, I believe this is for the web development, but I'll double check. Actually, Mo, are you still on here? I'll double check for you on that one, Serena. Right now it's the web development, but I'll double check for the UX design because we just haven't had that open course come up. And then the scholarships, they're for from Antonio. The scholarships are only for on-campus coursework. So right now, due to the quarantine, we are all pushed to remote. However, we have what are called virtual Zoom rooms we've set up. So we have a virtual campus essentially set up. So it would be on campus, but we do have options for flexible schedules right now, and also remote work if you need. So I hope that answers your question there. Any other questions?
I have a question. Earlier in the slideshow, you had mentioned about including projects on your resume. So what does that, I guess, visually look at? Like, I know that I have my, right now, just a Behance resume that I'm, not resume, sorry, website portfolio that I'm gonna move on to Squarespace at some point that has the various projects I made in the boot camp that I took. But are you suggesting there's room to include that somehow on the resume?
So yes, I actually break out. So on your Behance, you have your portfolio, right?
Right.
And there should be multiple projects on that.
Sure.
So under the project section, I would talk about each of the projects. So if you only have one, I highly encourage you to do at least 2 or 3 that you can speak to well. So including on that, does that make sense? So I would have, for example, maybe you have a simple website that I developed. I have a API application, and then I built some kind of full stack CRUD application, right? Those are 3 different projects. They are all included on my laineykawaguchi.com site, but I would put and talk about each of those projects, because if you don't have previous work experience, that is going to be your work experience, and what you're going to talk about is that you have web development experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but the same applies for UX UI.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. So UX UI, for example, you would have a wireframe or prototype of 2 or 3 items. For example, a real life web design that I did. And then for prototyping, I did like another project on just like a simple redesign of a feature on a project. Depending on what program you're in, they do different projects. And so usually you'll have 1 or 2. And if you, like I said, if you only have 1 coming out of or on your application, try to work to get more building and more work in, and just showing that you have kind of that breadth of experience of, hey, I'm not just doing this one product, but I'm also working on this. Or if you have a big project with multiple features, in UX design, let's say I did the homepage and then the full shopping cart process and maybe some other like landing page thing, I would even break those into sub projects and talk about.
And if you have like a personal project that's very much a work in progress because you're doing it on the side between things, you can kind of just share what you're up to, or is it okay if it's not a complete project?
Yes, I would share your GitHub repo, or if it's UX, I would just kind of do a screenshot of the most complete one and talk about everything.
Okay.
And
And my last thing, because at least the human resume should be 1 page, are we presenting this project information in the form of bullets similar to the way everything else is formatted, or is it more visual with pictures and screenshots or whatnot?
So I steer away from the visual because it takes up a lot of space.
No, that was my concern.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I would say
Yeah,
no
bullets.
visuals really. Yeah, bullets would be best.
Mm-hmm. You can
I
do
mean,
links to your portfolio exactly to where your project is.
And that's where you can get creative too, because once they go to your portfolio, like you have the control to show them whatever you want, and have, especially for design, you can say, go check out my project, and then you can go into depth of each phase rather than just having 3 or 4 bullets to write about it. So that's where I'd say that's when to put a lot of screenshots, describe every detail, every struggle you overcame, what problems you figured out, why you did that, what pain point you're trying to resolve, right? And what research and stuff like that, like the research phase and then going to the design phase. That's what I'd recommend.
Right, so I have a link to that on my resume. So is that sufficient, or I should also include a few like tasters of the things I've done?
I would talk about a couple projects if you
Okay.
do not have work experience.
Okay.
In
Okay.
UX design. Mhm.
Thank you so much.
Oh yeah, and feel free to send me a copy and Danielle a copy of your resume if you want some
Yeah,
feedback.
absolutely.
Thank you. I will.
Okay, any other questions? Let's see. So for those of you, I think there's a last question. Hi, Tay. So what about those who have enterprise experience and want to showcase skills without violating NDAs? You have to be very careful. If there is NDAs or anything of proprietary data or code, don't put them. Every company I look at, it's like, if this person's violating their privacy or their company's NDA, you probably don't want to hire them because they're high risk, right? So for that, talk about your project, mention and put a little note like, hey, this is, under contract, I cannot legally share this. So for example, I had some project work at Adobe that I can't share that code base or that repo at all, but I can talk about the project and what I did and give them a little bit of background. So be cautious when it comes to working with enterprise because you don't want to breach their contracts, and you also don't want to show a new employer that you're breaching contract or that you're going and showing code. So I hope that answers that question, Tay.
It does. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, just be cautious. I know that's one thing that for your own safety too and protection that I always say, err on the side of being more cautious. And usually, I don't know if other people, I have my code, so if they really wanted to see it, I won't share it with them to document anywhere, but I'll do like a Zoom and be like, this is what I built. So there are ways to like show them, or you can just kind of say, you can't take this, I'm just sharing, and then you hide some of the anything private or private data stuff. So
Thank
any
you.
other?
I guess what about like if you had some screenshots of the work that you've done, but it's not a code base and like you don't have any branding on your screenshots for a portfolio, is that appropriate? Is that a breach?
It depends on the company's policy. I'm not in legal, so I can't say, but I know I've seen some companies are okay. I just go back to your old hiring manager and just ask, like, is it all right if I share this, if I blur out, maybe, because you have some variables that you pull in from different queries or databases, and those naming conventions might be proprietary, but if you blur those out and the code's still fine, as long as it's not something new. I just always say I'm not a legal, I can't give legal advice. However, I just would reach back out to your hiring manager, past employer, and say, what is okay for me to show on that, and just double check, or just kind of blurring enough out. I think there's a certain percentage regardless. I'll have to look that one up of what's change code. But I would just say, yeah, just if you blur out anything private or really important, that's to that would tie it to that company or make that code unique, or some sort of functionality that's, if you invented something and you were working there, you obviously can't share that because that's under breach. But if it's like snippets of something you did, that should be okay.
Great. Thank you so much.
I had a question. So I'm kind of like switching over careers, and I'm doing I have worked with like UX and UI design for a while, but but that's just because through team members. But basically I was like really successful in my previous career, which had to do a lot with cinematography. And I got to work with brands like Adobe and things like that. One thing that I've been coming across is I've had a lot of like interviews, and their main question is like, how come, because I got to like travel a lot and work with a lot of great brands, but they're like, well, how come they're looking as if I'm like downstepping, like this is like a downstepping. Like they always ask me like, well, how come do you want to like work here, or why are you switching to this position? And like my answer is always like, oh, I'm really passionate about it, or I want to like enter the corporate world, if that makes sense. Because I want to have like an actual like office job with like long term, instead of just freelancing, if that makes sense. But I don't know how to like I don't know how to say that in a. It's one of those questions that always throws me off, and it's been like happening frequently.
Yeah, and one thing you can address that with is, I mean, I don't know your full background, but that's something that I'd love to like explore further of what made you decide to switch. And it's because if it is you're passionate and you want to pursue something where you can like create and go more design and actually and then have stability, a lot of people can't really question stability. And I've noticed with hiring, like, I mean, if you have family, like stability is huge, right? So you can just let them know, I'm looking for something more consistent with a lot more stability. Plus I found I have this really big passion for this, and I loved freelancing, don't get me wrong, and it was awesome, but there are downfalls too that you aren't seeing. And you can keep it general and vague and don't have to go into detail what those downfalls were for you, or, you know, the things that made you decide to switch careers. Because that's something where, and I'd like to talk to you probably more offline of, you know, what the details of what they're asking and what types of jobs you're applying to, where they're feeling like this is a down step, but really stability and showing them like, I actually really like this and I want to go back to something more stable and like without as much traveling and having an office job like that. For me right now at this time in my life sounds great, right? So that's something we can go over definitely. Like, let me know, shoot me an email, and I'd love to like talk to you further about that and how we can talk around of those kinds of kind of guided. I think sometimes people put their own perceptions on you, and you have to remember my life is
that's what it felt like.
Yeah, that's when it's like, you know, everybody's life is different. Like for me, I like a 9 to 5. Well, I mean, I work here all the time, but like I like a stable office kind of feeling. Freelancing, I've done consulting, didn't love it, like the flexibility, didn't like that. I'm a planner, really hard to plan for next month, right? So, I mean, that's where we can talk and kindly say them and course correct them in a way that's like, yeah, I totally get what you're saying. Thank you. That's a huge compliment to you, honestly. And then but say, but this is what I want for me, you know, like in a nice way. So we can work on that, definitely.
Thank you. I'll definitely read via email.
Perfect. Right. Anybody else? And typically what we've done in the past is we workshop during the last like 40 minutes or so an open QA and sit down one-on-one. So if anybody wants to be brave and throw out the resume, we can do that together, or we can take it offline and just do some breakouts later, or shoot us an email and we can schedule some time to go over anything with you guys.
I had a quick comment to make. Oh, go ahead.
I'm brave enough to show my resume, guys.
Oh, okay.
It's not ready at the moment, so I'm scared you might find stupid stuff like some typos and
we'll disregard
but because I'm not looking for a job at the moment, but any feedback would be really greatly appreciated. So I would like to do.
Okay, Fox, do you mind? I undid my sharing. If you go and can you do a screen share of your resume?
Sure.
While he's doing that, Chris, do you want to ask your question?
Yes.
Oh yeah, so it was sort of a comment actually. I don't know if this applies to anyone else, but for a long time, like during V School and for a little while after V School, I guess this is in regards to like the job experience section on the resume and how we have like recent grads will often have like multiple job experience sections that are not like super related to web development. And so one thing I did was I actually just started kind of volunteering to like code things for the company that I was working for. And the first time I did it, I didn't even like ask a manager. Just when things slowed down, I just started doing it, started building it. And then, so like technically speaking, I was getting paid to code. And, you know, obviously I didn't like misrepresent that or anything on the resume, but like, you know, after that, then the next job I had same thing. And that lasted like, I think like 3 months or so before it gained attention. And then I was getting time set aside every day, like 4 to 8 hours on a regular basis to just code. And so even though my role wasn't as a software developer, I was coding because I had started solving business problems with code. And so I think that's a pretty sweet way to like, even if you don't have a job as a developer yet, to use the job you have to gain the experience to put on the resume. And that's largely, I think, why I was able to get the interview for the software development job I have now.
That's great. I've totally done that too, Chris. So thanks for sharing that. sometimes you
Yeah,
have to do
guys.
work for free to get paid for it.
Yep.
And having a project that stands out like that's like awesome, because then you can put it under, you know, your work experience. Even if it's like somebody's site, like my friends, even if I do my girlfriend's beauty site and then we get traffic to it, that's real work experience. You just put it under work experience and like freelancing and consulting and show them how you did, because that's going to be obviously, you know, work stuff. So Chris, thank you. Like seriously, I'm so glad that it's all worked out really well for you. And like, that is awesome. Like, I'm just like, you're a rock star for just like taking the reins and like taking charge of your career. Alrighty, I think I can see it. Can everybody see, I think, Fox's resume here?
Yes, yes, it's in Markdown. So basically, when I print it, I just print Ctrl+P in my browser, and I print it to a PDF. So that's the way I send it.
Cool. I like Markdown personally.
So
Okay, how many pages are we looking at here?
Oh, I made it very short. It's 5 pages at the moment. I can surely make it shorter. The issue is that I'm like freaking old already, yes? So I'm on the job market since like the 1999 or something like this. I know you can't see it on my face.
So for maybe like applicant tracking systems, it's appropriate to use Markdown, right? Because it's like all just text and like very basic stuff, and it doesn't matter page length. However, what we'll want to look into is, let's look at all these pieces that you have included. And awesome, you have AWS certs. This is great. Very cool, right? You have your information. But then if I go down to your work experience, one thing that I'm looking at is in your role, I want to see kind of what your impact was a little bit more. Managed to become trusted and respected hands-on technical leader. So did you lead a team of, you know, employees? Kind of what did you do in this role to really gain that? And, you know, what were the things that were impacting to the company, do you think?
So as this is a resume for tech lead roles, I'm ambitious enough to apply for this kind of roles at the moment. So at the bottom, I've put this section which contains my previous leadership roles. But now I see after your talk that it should go more to the top. I should write it like more in English.
They should be combined. So rather than having two sections, keep the leadership experience in the work experience. So for each job that you had a leadership role, talk about that leadership role within that job and show us how you were a leader. Don't tell us how you were a leader. So don't just say, I managed to be a leader. Say, I led a team, just like Lainey was telling us earlier. It's that thing that you always heard in English class, show, don't tell. You can say, oh, I'm a team player. Well, how are you a team player? Just think about that. So move all of this into your work experience.
Can you elaborate a bit more, because it's not very clear to me?
Yes, we can give you some examples. For example, let's say your role here, managing technical implementations, what job does this tie to? And we'll go up to that job that's above, and we'll actually put that in those bullet points.
Okay. But what do you mean show, not tell? Here I exactly tried to show achievements very, very well. This is what was when I was a CTO.
Yeah, so when you're going to show rather than say you were doing something, like I can say I'm a director of operations, right? But that's not telling what I actually do. So you want to tell them I'm a manager or I'm a leader, but then right here it tells what you did. I did hiring and managing on a technical team, and I delivered high quality rebuild of the Fluids web application. So that's actually going to go above where you put led a team, right? You would actually put all the details of how you led that team up above and your achievements.
Okay.
Does that make more sense?
Okay. So
that makes sense.
Yeah. So rather than saying that you led a team, how did you lead?
Put all the description up there.
Okay. the second issue is, for the moment, for last year I'm a software architect, and I managed to become like a hands-on lead in the team. But previously my roles were not management, and for example, I was a CTO of a startup in 2012-13. So if I just put leadership here, and in the middle there will go all the stupid jobs like contracts, which are usually very short.
One recommendation I have for contract jobs, if you're working to condense your resume, because this is more like a CV in my mind, how CVs they're very exhaustive. In the UK, they use CVs very extensively. In the US, it's more resume, 1 page, 2 page. So what I would do is I recommend taking your contract jobs and putting them under various, so the employer would be various, or you can list them aside, but put as a contract jobs, and then you can combine those and just put them as each contract job a bullet point, if that makes sense. So I would say contract work or consulting, because you're freelancing consulting. And then I'd put, hey Garth, middleware, and put this all in one bullet line, and then do the next one on one bullet line. So that way your contracting jobs in between, they're all under your consulting belt or under one job description. So then we can just showcase your really important work and leadership.
Yes, but still, even if I combine these contracts, as for example, here I'm a leader, and I here on the contract I was hired as a leader, and then I was a CTO at Fluft. Here it's still, if I just put the leadership in here, it really won't be visible.
It will be, because you'll talk about it within those projects above. So, and what I would also do is because you have so much history, I would look at the job you're applying to really specifically and match the specific past jobs that make the most sense. So you're going to build, instead of a chronological resume, more of a functional resume. And you're going to showcase to them, these are the jobs that are the most relevant to this job I'm applying to, right? And based on your experience, I will tell you right now, it's okay for you to have probably a 2-page resume. So that's one thing, because you have a lot more history and work experience. But I would say that you can showcase the things that match. So I would pick jobs from your past that really apply to that job I'm applying to and add those in. So does that make sense? So you are going to tailor.
Brilliant. That's brilliant. Okay, functional resume, and then I can skip, because who cares at the moment that I was a contractor PHP developer for 2 months in 2012?
Yeah.
Oh, and honestly, Fox, 2-month jobs, because of the extent of your work experience, I don't even know if I would include that. Really, it's such a short amount of time, and you want to show, I see a job on there that was for 2 years. That's way better, because it shows you're at the job for 2 years. If you were there for 2 months, they'll kind of be like, what was this 2-month blip? What happened? They'll want to know more. That'll catch their eye in a negative way, and you don't want that. So I would definitely keep this. It's kind of like a master sheet, like Lainey said, and every time you apply for a job, you can look at it. What are they looking for? You can jump over here. Oh, I have this job. I have this job. I have this job. This will look great. I have this exact experience. I'm going to put this in my resume format that I have, and I'm going to send it over. And a cover letter for you could probably be pretty beneficial because of how much experience you have. And you could really write out, I have this many years experience doing this, and you could list out all the real skills that you have. And a skill section for you on your resume would probably be really long from what I'm seeing. So looks like you have a very long, impressive resume.
Yes, I started in IT in 1999, honestly. So, okay, thank you very much. So what I understand the most is I need to switch it to functional resume. So if I'm applying for tech lead roles, just include the roles which are relevant from the technical leadership or from very similar tech stack.
Yes, and what I would recommend is you have this master resume. I have a giant, this is your long master resume. Go into detail on this for your work experience, add the results that you've given into these little roles to what the role is. I would actually add roles and responsibility to that. And I would put those and exhaustively create this master one. So then when you have to, this is just for time efficiency, then you can just copy and paste in and reuse, all those jobs. So I would say create an exhaustive one, and then go ahead and just, based on the job, you can plug and play kind of, oh, this one wants more DevOps stuff, pull in my DevOps jobs. Oh, this is more development, I'll put in more of my development stuff. This one is leadership or managerial, put in all my roles of management. So that's what I'd recommend. And like I said, you can have probably probably have 4 or 5 jobs on yours potentially listed because you have an extensive background of work in industry. So that's what I would recommend.
Yes, that's a really brilliant advice. This is a markdown and it's on GitHub in a private repo. So I can have everything in a master branch, like
Yes.
dump of all the ideas, all the education. And then when I apply for a job, make a branch, cut it to 2 pages, to 5 jobs, and write specific skills for the job, send. Okay, honestly, guys, thank you very much. I think I took enough time. I'm very grateful. That's what I'm going to do.
Thanks for sharing, Fox. That was awesome. We love talking to you.
Yes, and everybody should share. You see, my resume is nothing brilliant. It really doesn't look very well. But you see, I only got positive feedback. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, and feel free to email us. I'd love to see another version when you cut it down a little bit as well.
Okay, I'll do this as soon as possible. I have a job that I'm looking at. I think I've closed the tab. I want to apply for that one just because I can maybe do better at my work. So I can tailor it for this job and send it to you.
Okay, I'm gonna put Lainey and I's emails just in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys can get to us easier.
Yeah, please feel free to email us. And if you want all this information and our resources, send me a message. And then what I'll do after this is we'll probably send out a little bit of a poll because we talked about a lot of topics. We mentioned cover letters, what to include. We mentioned like tailoring resumes from the job description, right? And then also even detail on how to go over LinkedIn. So I'll put a poll on which one of the next that we'll have, and we'll probably send it out. We'll send you an email to this meetup group of kind of the next steps of what we're going to take, but it will be guided by your feedback on a survey of should we do LinkedIn next? Should we do cover letter review? Should we do, stuff like that? So we can keep an ongoing kind of, we want to give you the most robust portfolio overall and the most well-rounded resume. And then if time permits later down the future, we'll definitely go down the road of interview stuff like we touched base with Serena, so we can go over those types of things, how to answer and interview questions, how do I get out of uncomfortable kind of questions like that, etc. So we'll send out a poll after this. Send me an email if you would like a copy of the PowerPoint, our checklist, and kind of any supporting documents from today. I'll also include links, from JobScan as well, and a couple other resources that I use to help kind of figure out what applicant tracking systems are using. So please feel free to shoot me an email. We'll reply to those and I'll send you kind of this package, and then I'll send out a survey through the meetup to see what's next. But just want to say thank you all for showing up and your time and your participation. You guys have been awesome. Can't thank you all enough. Chris, you're becoming a pro, dude. You're ready to come join the team. Join us. And so I just want to say thanks to everybody for your participation. And I love to have like the community aspect. So if you need anything, like feel free to reach out to us and let me know if you have any other questions. But really just so grateful. Danielle, I know you're probably super excited.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys. It's been great to see people's faces that aren't my family. And you guys were awesome. I loved your questions. It was really nice to talk to all of you.
And shout out to Fox, you're uber brave for sharing.
Yeah, I love that. That was awesome.
Nice.
Anyway, well, thank you guys for your time. We ended a little bit early today, but like I said, if you want a one-on-one workshop, just send us a message and we'll coordinate that. All right.
Thank you all.
Best of luck, everybody. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.